Welcome back to Automotive Day at Global Supply Chain Week. My name's Kevin Hill, executive publisher here at FreightWaves, and now we're going to talk about modes and mode selection with John Godfrey. He's an executive supply chain consultant at Pirelli Tires, where he's got 10 or 15 years of experience running Pirelli Tires all over the world out of Rome, Georgia. How are you doing today, John?
Doing great, Kevin. Great to talk to you.
It's always great to talk to you. It's been a little while, but it's great to catch up right now. So, John, you've been through COVID-19. We've all been through the pandemic. We've all had some challenges with shipping, logistics, the entire supply chain. How has selecting which modes or which modes have been the most challenging so far for you?
Yeah, well, I'd say all the modes have been challenging. We're seeing issues in everything that we ship, no matter how we ship it, from sea containers all the way down to air freight parcels, coming across the Atlantic Ocean. Specifically, if just you're looking at ocean, we're seeing a lot of congestion at ports on the West Coast and also in the Northeast. But we're also seeing occasional congestion in places like Savannah, Georgia, which we haven't really seen in a while. Bad weather through the winter is something that you're always used to, but really the port congestion is something that's really hit us hard. In addition, we ship a lot of freight transatlantic coming from Europe or coming out of South America. And, this freight, we've seen less sailings, more transshipments. These are things that really lengthen your supply chain and make things a whole lot more challenging when you're trying to do just-in-time shipments to an OE, auto manufacturer. Also you've seen a lot of congestion with drayage carriers coming out of the ports, and then just looking at like full truckload capacity, it's been challenging. Rates have been going up, and then with all the e-commerce business, tires are really not a desirable commodity to be shipping LTL or parcel. So we've seen a lot of challenges getting the correct capacity with LTL and then parcel carriers like FedEx and UPS, especially during the holiday season. Stuff has been stuck at local terminals. Things that should be next day shipments are taking upwards of a week. And so we've actually been looking at options, doing some maybe dedicated transportation just around the regions of our warehouses. So that's Northeast or the Atlanta area or Los Angeles, Southern California. We've also had to, because of some supply shortages, we've had to look at air freights coming out of Europe. And really, these have been much more expensive than what we've been used to paying in the past. And in fact, sometimes some of our air freight requests, we just can't even meet it. It's not a matter of money. There's just no capacity coming out of Europe to supply some of our original equipment customers. So, modes are challenging. And when you have capacity constraints, you have to go to the more expensive, quicker modes.
You definitely do. You mentioned, transatlantic, trans-Pacific. What about cross-border into and out of Mexico? How has capacity been on that international shipping lane?
Yeah, so our largest factory in the North American region is down in Mexico, and we get a little short of half of our supply for the United States out of our Mexican factory. It was certainly a challenge there at the end of the third quarter, coming into the fourth quarter. We had to bring on some new carriers. We had to pay a lot of expedite fees because really we were expecting this crisis to be, let's say, longer and deeper. And some channels and parts of our market just came roaring back, and we had to supply it. And customers were demanding tires. And so coming out of Mexico was pretty challenging. We weren't able to do a lot of intermodal freight because the transit times were too long. So we were really looking at lots of full truckload freight coming out of Mexico. And we had to bring on new carriers and really look at our capacity constraints down there.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, even in normal times before the pandemic, northbound traffic out of or northbound truckload out of Mexico was always challenging. So I can imagine if you have any shock to that system, how challenging it would be to find carriers and find capacity where you could move freight northbound into Laredo and to the U.S.
Yeah, and I mean, we have a lot of we're supplying a lot of original equipment out of our Mexican factory, and these shipments are often going direct to our OEM customers. And so, I mean, these are just-in-time shipments. You don't have a lot of leeway to be a couple of days late. You have to be on time, and for that reason, we started looking at more carriers, bringing in more carriers, and we're still looking to do that in the first quarter of this year to make sure that we have a good supply base of carriers coming out of Mexico.
And we talk about the modes, the shipping modes in these international shipments and capacity there. How has customs handled it and customs agents handled it?
You
Has
know, we
it there
really
been a
haven't seen
delay?
a whole, yeah, we really haven't
Hmm.
seen a whole lot of delay with U.S. customs. That really hasn't been the bottleneck. And, sometimes in the past it has been, but really that has not been the bottleneck that we've been seeing.
So going forward, you have these capacity challenges. What are some of the tough decisions, the difficult decisions, and maybe not, maybe finding out what the right decision is, and that's the difficult part of and the challenging part of it, because the data doesn't exist, or you're running on little or no information, and it's just more of an instinctual feel because things are changing. What have some of those decisions been like?
Yeah, I mean, some of the decisions you're having to make are, first of all, maybe you have a contractual rate with a carrier, and they're saying we can't supply a trailer at that contractual rate anymore because that was a rate that was set pre-COVID. So you're having to go to spot rates, which are more expensive. Maybe you're having to bring on carriers that you don't trust or you don't maybe have an issue, let's say, whether it's payment terms or something like that. So you're having to bring on maybe some carriers that don't are not perfect fit for your organization, but they've got some capacity, and you got to get a shipment. And when you're supplying to original equipment manufacturers, you can't be late. They have production schedules that they have to meet, and your component is key to them making their production schedule and keeping their factories running.
Yeah, yeah. So we had the factory shutdowns about a little less than a year ago, back in April-ish, May, and then ramp up production again. Are we like at 100% production back, just humming along, like I don't want to say like that didn't happen, but with um, no lagging effect right now.
No, we're still having lagging effects. I mean, yeah, we're north of 90% at capacity, but I mean, the issue is you're still having labor call outs due to COVID. I mean, contact tracing and things like that. So you're not having all the workers that you need in many of the factories around the world. And when you've brought in new workers, they're not as efficient as the experienced workers that you have. So these are things that just clog up the supply chain, and you're not getting the 100% capacity that you need necessarily.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned labor and warehousing and workers, because it's something that you handle there at Pirelli as well. And when we were talking, kind of like our pre-production talk a couple weeks ago, you showed up with full PPE, and a little disappointed that you're not all PPE'd out today as well. But what has been the challenges for you, and what have you been going through with with having a lot of people, a lot of employees in warehousing, and keeping them safe, and doing the contact tracing and everything else that we need to do in COVID?
Well, I mean, of course, during the summer when we were at the height of the crisis, there were lots of issues with there was stimulus money out there, unemployment insurance, and sometimes it was difficult to get more workers into the warehouse, and there was a huge fear. Now, I mean, you have people with the appropriate PPE in the warehouses and so forth, but you still have people that are getting COVID while they're at home when they're with their family and friends, and so you have these call outs. And we have a lot of work in the warehouse that can be done by, let's say, unskilled temporary workers, but a lot of it can't. I mean, our product's very specific. Like most industries, you're doing a lot of inventory inspections. You have a lot of processes, procedures, systems that you just can't train to somebody. So these are things that when you're losing, 10 people out of a warehouse and they're in key positions, it means that you're losing throughput. Things that should be taking a few hours are now taking a few days, and so these slow down your whole warehouse throughput. And this has been challenging at all of our locations. You have multiple local regulations that you have to follow, especially out in places like Southern California, state regulations on who can travel in. So it's even difficult for 3PL management to be moving between facilities and helping out when you have a crisis someplace. So we've really been having to work very strongly with our 3PLs and making sure that they have the correct support from us as a customer around product support, IT, things like that, and then being flexible. Maybe setting up some new rules, things like that, in order to make sure that we're servicing our customers, but also keeping our warehouse workers safe for our 3PL partners.
Yeah, you mentioned your 3PL partners. How has that relationship changed or remained the same, or what's the most important parts of it? Has that changed the importance of certain segments of what they fulfill for you?
Well, I mean, they're key. I mean, they're the ones that are warehousing our product and delivering product to our customers. We can't operate without them. Um, we have multi-year contracts like many companies do. And, we didn't write a whole section to deal with COVID. So a lot of things were dealt with on the fly. You don't know how things are going to end up, but you got to get the work done. And so it's a lot of communication and a lot of, negotiation to make sure that the 3PLs are able to work and that you're getting the service out of them that you need to have.
How's technology helped you out in over the last 12 months, and kind of what, going through this, what are some of your projections for technology, and what would be useful going forward that we can take out of this?
Yeah, I mean, what we've learned is it's better to have automatic processes with systems rather than manual processes that require a large human element where you have to have training and so forth. If you can do automated scanning and things like that, these are things that kind of foolproof the system and keep you from making mistakes and errors. When you're doing a lot of manual processes, this requires training and requires having consistent people, a consistent workforce, which can be very challenging in this period. And then, you mentioned IT and so forth. A lot of companies, we've seen it in the news, especially on your websites. I mean, there have been this rash of cyber attacks in the second half of the year. And let me be honest, these have hit our suppliers and our suppliers of suppliers and, companies that we all know. So this has been really challenging that, suddenly some of the basic things that we've learned to trust um, over the last decade or 2 decades around email and so forth, suddenly we were having to go to manual procedures because maybe we had a cyber attack and we had to make sure that our systems weren't infiltrated. And, we were, working with our suppliers to make sure systems were okay. This is a challenging moment when you have to go back to procedures that are manual and on paper. So.
Yeah, and on cyber attacks, were there any instances of whenever your suppliers or your vendors got hit that created a backlog for Pirelli that you had to deal with as well because you
No,
couldn't
no, we
ship
were
the
able to
goods?
get through everything with when one of our, suppliers got hit, and you just go to backup systems, backup emails, and you work through it. We didn't have any failures to our customers,
Hmm.
and it was challenging, but I know that a lot of other companies in many different industries were facing the same types of challenges during that period.
Did it throw kind of a backlog into your inventory level? So because maybe you couldn't ship goods and
No,
no, okay.
no. Basically, we've come out of this crisis, with much higher demand in some channels than we were ever expecting. So there was no backlog on inventory. In fact, we're still, running short on things that we need for our customers. And supply chains in automotive and especially in tires right now are very tight. Most manufacturers are facing the same challenges that we are to varying degrees, and it means that in this segment of the economy, things are roaring back, and that means that it means that we're putting a lot of pressure on our manufacturing capacity to get as much product out as we can.
And I guess some of that tightness extends all the way upstream to procuring raw materials. I imagine that's been a
Yeah,
challenge.
that's something I really haven't been addressing since I've been back here at Pirelli. But yeah, I mean, raw materials, it's the basis of, and we have things like natural rubber, synthetic rubber, textile, steel. I mean, these are the main components that go into tires.
Yeah. So when we go switch back to ocean carriers and kind of those transatlantic shipments, we talk. I talk all the time about trans-Pacific, out of Asia into the West Coast. Um, how's capacity? I mean, I know you say it's very, very tight. How's it compared to Trans-Pacific? To give us a kind of a benchmark, is that those transatlantic ocean carriers and shipments and voyages?
Yeah, we've seen reduced sailings, and often things coming out of, let's say, Eastern Europe and Russia require transshipments that maybe you don't see on the Pacific side, but on the Atlantic, something gets transshipped somewhere in the Mediterranean or in Spain, someplace like that. So,
We were talking about labor and warehousing just a couple seconds ago. Though there's also, and labor is talent. But when we really talk about talent, I mean, how's the search for talent within the supply chain going during 2021? I know everyone's talking about supply chain. It's become really sexy these days. How's the search for talent been for you?
yeah, so I mean, a lot of people never heard the term supply chain 1 year ago, and now everybody's heard it. And I think maybe some of the rules that we had from the past in supply chain have now changed. So really, it's key for most organizations to have more and better supply chain talent in the organization. So it's not just in the warehouses and driving the trucks. We also have a demand in the industry, and specifically at Pirelli, for better supply chain talent. And so, I'm always on the search to add some more key people, talented people to the organization.
Always someone to handle the data, right? There's always data
Handle the
and numbers
data,
to be
make
crunched,
decisions, get to know
making decisions.
suppliers, get to know customers. I mean, this is
Yeah.
what supply chain is all about.
It really is. John, thank you again for your time. How does our audience reach out and contact you and learn more about Pirelli and maybe some supply chain positions?
Yeah, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm always there, and I look forward to hearing from people that maybe have questions or comments about what we're doing here. And Kevin, once again, thanks for having me on. It's always great to talk to you. You're a great resource in the industry.
Thank you, John. It's always great to talk to you too. You're the market intelligence that I get to draw from and go out and speak it to the world. So thank you very much. And again, John Godfrey from Pirelli Tires.